Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Tuesday night Bible study. Tonight we'll be looking into Ecclesiastes chapter 3 with my papa once again. Please engage with us by liking, commenting, sharing, or even hosting a watch party of this Bible study. It's also available on YouTube. There will be discussion questions to follow, so please engage with us there as well. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into Ecclesiastes chapter 3. There is an occasion for everything, and a time for every activity under heaven, a time to give birth and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to avoid embracing, a time to search and a time to count as lost, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. What does the worker gain from his struggles? I have seen the task that God has given people to keep them occupied. He has made everything appropriate in its time. He has also put eternity in their hearts, but man cannot discover the work of God has done from beginning to end. I know that there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and enjoy the good life. It is also the gift of God whenever anyone eats, drinks, and enjoys all his efforts. I know that all God does will last forever. There is no adding to it or taking from it. God works so that people will be in awe of him. Whatever is has already been, and whatever will be already is. God repeats what has passed. I also observed under the sun, there is wickedness at the place of judgment, and there is wickedness at the place of righteousness. I said to myself, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, since there is a time for every activity and every work. I said to myself, this happens concerning people, so that God may test them, and they may see for themselves that they are like animals. For the fate of people and the fate of animals is the same. As one dies, so dies the other, and they all have the same breath. People have no advantage over animals, since everything is futile. All are going to the same place, all come from dust, and all return to dust. Who knows if the spirit of people rises up and the spirit of animals goes downward to the earth? I have seen that there is nothing better than for a person to enjoy his activities, because that is his reward. For who can enable him to see what will happen after he dies? Hi, Pawpaw. Thanks for coming back this week.
Well, hi, Lauren. Glad to be back.
Good. So we'll just jump right in. So the first question is referring to verses 1 through 8. So these verses show us that there are different seasons and phases of life, yet they also show that we live in a world where hard times will inevitably come and where life seems monotonous. So how does this allude to our purpose here on earth as it relates to the next set of verses, which are verses 9 through 15?
Well, in verses 1 through 8, the poetry is beautiful as it describes the different seasons and facets of life. Yet, it also casts a dark shadow because it reminds us of the inevitability of trouble and evil and of the relentless monotony of life. Now, sometimes we look at these verses as a variety of things that go on in the lives of mankind of every age. But the words a time and a time, as Solomon used here, are intended to indicate Solomon's sense of the monotony of all things rather than of their variety.
Mm.
This is oppressive because it seems that these verses describe life as one step forward followed by one step back. We never get anywhere.
Yeah.
We move from one kind of action which seems fitting to another which puts it all in reverse. Now, in these verses, a bad facet answers each good facet. Solomon understood that Though there are good things in life, the bad things can't be escaped. So this list in verse 1 through 8 also shows us the need to take full advantage of the time that God gives us. Now, Ephesians 5 and verse 15 and 16 says, "Pay careful attention then to how you walk, not as unwise people, but as wise, making the most of the time because the days are evil." Now, many men lost their soul, as Saul did his kingdom, by not discerning his time. Esau came too late. So did the foolish virgins. Now, someone once said, when the gate of grace is over, when the gate is shut, when the drawbridge is taken up, there is no possibility of entrance. So, how does this allude to our purpose here on earth? Now, Solomon says that God has given people these tasks to keep them occupied. How would it work if there was birth and no death, or laughing without weeping, or a time to build without a time of tearing down? The earth could not contain everything. So there has to be a balance. So God made everything beautiful in its own time to maintain that balance. When there's a time to be born, there's a time to die. If there's a time to laugh, there has to be a time to weep. If there's a time to build, there has to be a time to tear down. Life goes on and on and on, and nothing changes. People are born and people die. People laugh and they also weep. People build and people tear down. It's always been this way, and it always will be. God repeats what has passed, and it's all appropriate in God's timing. So we are to eat and drink and enjoy all our efforts while we can, because it's the gift of God. Now, Solomon states that all that God does will last forever. There is no adding to it or taking from it. All that God has, or all that God does, has eternal purpose. We're to live our lives in awe of Him, and although we can't understand it, our lives from birth to death has an eternal purpose.
Wow. Thank you for that. So the next question is based on verse 11. So if God has put eternity in our hearts and made us in his image, which is eternal, then why do we try to seek satisfaction on what is available to us here on earth when we are clearly longing for something greater?
Okay, so God has put eternity in the human heart. And every human soul is a God-given awareness that there's something more than this transient world. And with that awareness of eternity comes a hope that we can one day find a fulfillment that's not afforded by the vanity in this world. Now, verse 11 affirms the idea that humans operate in a different way than other forms of life. We have a sense of eternity in our lives. We possess an innate knowledge that there's something more to life than what we can see and experience in the here and now. Seasons come and go, but does anything in this life truly satisfy? And the answer to that is no. All is vanity.
Mhm.
But through all the ups and downs of life, we have a glimpse of stability because God has set eternity in the human heart. Now, life is but a vapor, but we know that there's something past this life. We have a divinely implanted awareness that the soul lives forever and this world is not our home. So, knowing all that, why do we try to seek satisfaction on what is available to us here on earth when we're clearly longing for something a lot greater? It all has to do with our own personal relationship with the Lord. Ever since sin came into the world and caused separation with God, we've been enthroning worldly things where God belongs in our lives. All our lives, we've been told that we should be successful in this life. Successful in this sense means making a lot of money, having a lot of things. And so we live our lives trying to make this happen. And in so doing, we put our careers before God, even when we clearly know that He said that we're to have no other gods before Him. Now, not only our careers, but a lot of other things, sports, hobbies, entertainment, and yes, even our children and our families. In God's eyes, we are not to put anything before Him. We should, from the beginning, include the Lord in all our decisions, and then we realize that all that we have belongs to Him, and we're to use it to glorify Him. Now, as God's children, we can find purpose in worshiping Him and laying down our lives to His mission while here on this earth. Now, this doesn't mean that all things of this world are bad and should be avoided, such as money, pleasure, knowledge. These can be good things when valued correctly under God. But they are not of this world, not eternal, meaning they will not satisfy the needs for eternal satisfaction that God has placed on each of our hearts. We will only find fulfillment in Him and in Him alone. And so we have to ask ourselves, do we worship God on Sunday and spend the rest of the week seeking and maintaining our own desires? Or do we worship God every day of the week and make Him a part of all that we're doing? Now, this is a very convicting question for most of us, don't you think?
Yeah, it definitely is. And I know that's hard because, especially in the country that we live in, it's so easy to get complacent with everyday things and our own personal lives, and we often forget the greater mission and our greater purpose and why we're really here on earth. And because we get caught up with just everyday life, and I think that is really hard for a lot of people to come to terms with. But how follow up to that? What are some ways that we can seek God out throughout the week? Just some practical things. What are some things that you do to seek God through the everyday things that you do?
We have to realize, as we talked about last week, that whatever we do, we need to realize that what we're doing is a gift from God.
Right.
Whether that's our job, even though we may have not included Him in that and um, maybe took the wrong path as far as jobs go or whatever. But we have to be satisfied in that and realize that even that is a gift from God. And we have to have that personal relationship with the Lord before we can glorify Him in anything.
Yeah.
And so that means we need to read His Word, study His Word, and put that in our hearts and pray and talk to Him and have that relationship with Him. And then we'll know what He expects of us and what we should be doing with our lives.
Yeah, that's true. So moving on to the last question. This will be over verses 16 through 22. So Solomon makes many references, verses 16 and in verse 17, verses 16 and verses 19, to injustices happening under the sun or absent of eternity. So can you use those references to describe what life without an eternity mindset would look like, and oppositely, what life with an eternity mindset looks like?
Without God, every thought that we have is of this life because this is all we have. So we tend to make the best of it. Now, this may mean that we step on other people to make our way to be successful. It may mean that we steal instead of work for things. It may mean that we show abuse and oppression toward other people. It may mean that we take pleasure in hate if it soothes our feelings. It means that we live our lives with the morals and values that are directed by the world. We're seeing this lived out in our country today, and sometimes even in the church.
Yeah.
Sadly. However, people with a mindset of eternity sees this world as temporary and that this is not our home. We have a hope for greater things than this world can offer. God has promised us that eyes have not seen or ears heard what He is in store for us in eternity. We live our lives toward that. This means that we treat all people kindly. It means that we're willing to work for what we have. It means that we're not abusive or oppressive to other people. It means that we love instead of hate. And that means even our enemies. It means that we live our lives with the morals and values dictated by God's Word. So we have our eyes and hopes focused on eternity and what God has in store for us, and not in the things that we can gain from this world.
Yeah, that's very true. And that's hard. Again, we tend to get caught up in the everyday goings and comings of this life, and it's hard to think of this as just a temporary dwelling, that we're meant for something greater and that we're meant to live forever, and in another place with God. And that's really difficult, even for a lot of Christians to understand and live their lives with that kind of mindset. But thank you for sharing that. And is there anything that you want to add? Any final thoughts on this chapter?
Well, I just want to say again that God has said that eyes have not seen or ears heard what He has in store for us in eternity. And that's exciting. And we don't know exactly what that is, but we see glimpses of it in God's Word. We see streets of gold. We see no more sadness, no more tears, no more death. living for all eternity. But above all of that, being able to see Jesus Christ, our Savior.
Mm-hmm.
And that is unimaginable to us right now. And so when we compare that to these little things we have on this earth, there is no comparison at all. So we
Yeah.
need to live our lives for Him and not for this world.
Yeah. I like that. Easier said than done, but as you said, if we can have a relationship with him and really try to build on that, then I think we can get there. So oh, sorry, go
That,
ahead.
that is essential in having that relationship
Mm-hmm.
with God. And that's the only way we know what He expects.
Mm-hmm.
And um, that's the only way we're going to be able to communicate with Him.
Right. Well, thank you so much for coming on again. I look forward to these every week, just learning new things, and especially I think this Bible story, this book of the Bible, I really feel like it applies to so many areas of our lives, and it's something that can be overlooked and misunderstood a lot of the time. So I like that we're going through it chapter by chapter and really trying to tackle how we can live a purposeful life for God while we're here. So thank you for that, for coming on and with your insight and teaching us. Because honestly, I reading this, I get confused. So thank you for helping me out with this. And do you mind praying us out before we go?
Okay, sure. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for um, this book and the Bible. We thank you for the words of wisdom that are contained in it. And we just pray, Father, as we go through this life, that you would give us wisdom. And you stated that when we ask for wisdom, you'll give us wisdom. And so we ask for that today, that you'd give us wisdom, go through this life, that we would know, Father, what you expect of us and how to go about doing that. So, Father, thank you again for this time. Be with us. We'll go through the remainder of this week, through this future that you have for us. Help us be obedient to you. And thank you for your love for us. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all for joining us again tonight. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Please don't forget that there's discussion questions to follow. And I will see y'all again next week. Have a great night.
Just in case, I will leave my things packed so I can run away. I cannot trust these voices. I don't have a line of prospects that can bring some kind of peace. There is nothing left to cling to that can bring me sweet release. I have no fear of drowning. It's the breathing that's taking all this work. Do you know what I mean when I say I don't wanna be alone? What I mean when I say I don't wanna be alone. Empty spaces, shadows Windows hit by street lights, warning signs and wait, tired conversations, in the absence of a shoulder, in the abscess of a thief, on the brink of this destruction, on the eve of bittersweet. Now all the demons look like prophets. I'm living out every word they speak, every word they speak, every word they speak, every word they speak. Do you know what I mean when I say I don't wanna be alone? What I mean when I say I don't wanna be alone? What I mean when I say I don't wanna be alone? Do you know what I mean when I say I don't wanna be alone? What I mean when I say I don't wanna be alone? What I mean when I say I don't wanna be alone, alone, alone. I don't wanna be alone. I have no fear of drowning. It's the breathing that's taking all this world.